The recruitment hall of Outpost Karen 9 was not designed for comfort. It was designed for judgment. The ceiling stretched high above, a web of metallic ribs and glowing conduits that hummed like distant thunder. Rows of alien officers filled the amphitheater seating, each representing a different species within the Galactic Coalition. Some were armored in chitin, others draped in bioluminescent veils, and a few appeared as shifting silhouettes of energy. At the center of it all stood a single human, recruit Elias Varn. He stood straight, though his boots were worn and his uniform clearly secondhand. The Coalition did not issue fresh gear to candidates from fringe worlds, not until they proved themselves. And Elias did not look promising. A low, melodic laugh echoed across the chamber. "This is the candidate Earth has sent." The voice belonged to Commander Syra Velith, a tall, silver-skinned officer of the Aurelian species. Her elongated eyes shimmered with faint amusement as she leaned back in her seat, fingers tapping lightly against the armrest. "He appears under-equipped," she continued, "undertrained, and, if I may be blunt, underwhelming." A ripple of agreement moved through the chamber. Elias said nothing. That, more than anything, annoyed her. "You do not respond?" Syra tilted her head. "No defense? No pride?" Elias finally spoke, his voice calm. "I was told to report for evaluation, Commander, not to argue." A few of the officers shifted, surprised. Syra smiled faintly, though her tone sharpened. "Then let us proceed to your evaluation." She gestured toward the massive reinforced doors at the far end of the hall. "Release the trial beasts." The doors groaned open. The temperature in the chamber dropped instantly as a low, guttural growl rolled out like a living storm. 3 creatures stepped into the light. They were massive, each the size of a transport vehicle, with armored hides layered like volcanic stone. Their eyes burned with a deep amber glow, and their breath steamed in the cold air. "Grave maw predators," Syra announced casually. "Native to the Death World Virex 7. A murmur spread through the officers. "Surely that is excessive," one of them whispered. Syra didn't look away from Elias. "The Coalition does not need soldiers who survive easy trials." The creatures paced forward, claws scraping against the reinforced floor. Elias remained still. Too still. "Do you understand the objective, human?" Syra asked. "Yes," Elias replied. "And survive." Syra leaned forward slightly. "Then I suggest you begin." The first grave maw lunged. It moved with terrifying speed, its massive body crossing the distance in a heartbeat. Gasps erupted across the chamber. But Elias moved. Not with panic. Not with desperation. With precision. He stepped sideways, just enough to avoid the creature's jaws, and raised his hand. Not a weapon. Not a shield. Just his hand. The grave maw froze. Its claws dug into the floor, stopping mere inches from Elias. The chamber fell silent. Syra's eyes narrowed. "What is this?" The second creature circled, snarling, its muscles tensing for attack. Elias didn't look at it. He kept his gaze on the first. Slowly, carefully, he lowered his hand and took a step forward. The grave maw stepped back. A collective intake of breath swept through the hall. "That's not possible," one officer muttered. "They cannot be tamed." Elias finally spoke again. "They're not being tamed." The second creature charged. Faster than the first. More aggressive. Elias turned this time, his movements fluid, almost instinctive. He crouched slightly and let out a sound, low, controlled, almost inaudible to most species in the room. But the grave maw heard it. It skidded to a halt, its massive head lowered. Then slowly it knelt. The third followed. Within seconds, all three beasts stood motionless before him. Then, one by one, they bowed. Silence consumed the chamber. Syra Velith rose to her feet. That is impossible. Elias straightened, brushing dust from his sleeve. No, he said quietly. It's not. She descended from her seat, stepping onto the arena floor, her gaze locked onto him. Explain. Elias glanced at the creatures, then back at her. They're not monsters, he said. They're survivors. Syra frowned. They are apex predators from one of the most hostile ecosystems known to the Coalition. Exactly. He gestured toward them. Everything on their world is trying to kill them. Bigger things, faster things, smarter things. If they were just mindless killers, they wouldn't last a week. The creatures remained still, their glowing eyes fixed on him. They're cautious, Elias continued. They read intent. They react to dominance, but not the kind you think. Syra crossed her arms. And what kind is that? Elias met her gaze. The kind that doesn't need to prove itself. A murmur spread again. Syra studied him carefully now, her earlier amusement gone. You expect me to believe you subdued 3 grave maws with confidence. Elias shook his head. No. With understanding. He stepped closer to one of the creatures, slowly raising his hand again. This time, he placed it gently against its armored snout. The beast didn't move. They don't fear strength, he said. They respect it. But strength isn't just force. Syra's voice lowered. Then what is it? Elias smiled faintly. Control. For a moment, no one spoke. Then one of the senior officers, a towering insectoid figure, leaned forward. Human. It clicked. Have you encountered these creatures before? Elias shook his head. No. Then how? I've encountered worse. The statement hung in the air. Syra's eyes sharpened. Explain. Elias hesitated. For the first time since entering the chamber, he seemed uncertain. But then he exhaled. Earth isn't as friendly as the Coalition thinks, he said. We just learned how to survive it. The lights dimmed slightly as the chamber system began recording at a higher level. This was no longer a simple evaluation. It was a case study. What do you mean? Syra asked. Elias looked around the room. You see a recruit in worn gear, he said. I get that. But where I come from, we don't get to wait for better equipment. He tapped his chest lightly. We adapt. He gestured toward the beasts again. Same as them. Syra considered his words. Then she turned toward the creatures. Release control fields, she ordered. A technician hesitated. Commander, if we do that. Do it. The invisible restraints holding the grave maws in place disengaged. The creatures shifted. Their muscles tensed. The chamber braced for chaos. But nothing happened. They remained where they were. One of them even lowered its head further, as if acknowledging Elias. Syra exhaled slowly. Incredible. She turned back to him. You realize what this means? Elias shrugged slightly. That I passed. A faint smile touched her lips. You did more than pass. She looked at the gathered officers. You have just demonstrated a level of behavioral influence over a class 9 predator species. She paused. Without technology. The insectoid officer spoke again. This could redefine field operations. Another added, imagine deploying units capable of neutralizing hostile fauna without combat. Syra raised a hand, silencing them. Her attention returned to Elias. What else can you do? Elias tilted his head. That depends. On what? On what you need. Syra studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she began to smile. Not the mocking smile from before. Something different. You will not be assigned to standard infantry, she said. Elias blinked. I won't. No. She turned toward the central console. Effective immediately, recruit Elias Varn is reassigned to Special Operations Division, Xenobiological Interface Unit. A ripple of shock moved through the chamber. That unit doesn't even accept recruits, someone whispered. Syra ignored them. You will undergo advanced training, she continued. You will work alongside coalition scientists and field commanders. She stepped closer to him. And you will teach us. Elias raised an eyebrow. Teach you? Yes. Her gaze was steady now. Because today, human, you showed us something we do not understand. The grave maws shifted again. One of them let out a low, rumbling sound. Not aggressive, but almost content. Elias glanced back at them. Can they stay? He asked. Syra blinked. Stay. With me, he clarified. They won't cause trouble. A few officers looked horrified, but Syra laughed softly. Not mocking this time. Genuine. You're asking to keep 3 Class 9 predators as companions? Elias shrugged. They seem to like me. As if on cue, one of the creatures nudged his shoulder gently. The chamber erupted in stunned silence. Syra turned away briefly, composing herself. Then she looked back at him. Very well, she said. But they will be monitored. Fair enough. She extended her hand. Welcome to the coalition, Elias Varn. He hesitated for only a moment before shaking it. Glad to be here. As the chamber began to clear, the officers still whispering among themselves, Syra remained where she was, watching him. The human recruit who had walked in wearing worn boots and quiet confidence had just changed everything. She approached him one last time. Tell me something, she said. Elias looked up. When I laughed at you, she continued, why didn't you react? He thought for a moment. Then he answered simply, because I didn't need to. Behind him, the 3 grave maws lowered themselves to the ground, calm and obedient, not conquered, not broken, but choosing to follow. And in that moment, for the first time since the founding of the Galactic Coalition, the aliens began to understand something terrifying. Humans did not dominate the wild. They did not conquer beasts. They did something far more dangerous. They made the wild listen. The days that followed did not bring celebration. They brought scrutiny. Outpost Karen 9 transformed almost overnight. What had once been a standard coalition military hub became a center of intense observation, analysis, and quietly unease. Elias Varn was no longer just a recruit. He was a variable. The grave maws were relocated to a secured containment sector, though containment quickly proved to be a misleading term. They did not behave like prisoners. They waited, always near the entrance, always watching for him. Scientists installed sensors, drones, and behavioral monitors, but the data only deepened the mystery. No aggression patterns, one researcher reported. No dominance displays, said another. They're not imprinting, a third added. At least not in any known way. Syra Velith stood behind the observation glass, arms folded, eyes fixed on the scene below. Elias had just entered the enclosure. The moment he stepped inside, the largest grave maw rose to its full height, not in threat, but in acknowledgement. The others followed, forming a loose semicircle around him. Not surrounding, not trapping, positioning, like sentinels. They're guarding him, Syra murmured. A scientist beside her hesitated. Or he's guarding them. Elias crouched slightly, placing a hand on the ground. The largest grave maw mirrored the motion. Syra exhaled slowly. Record everything. Training began soon after, but it did not look like training. At least, not by coalition standards. There were no drills. No weapon simulations. No tactical briefings in the traditional sense. Instead, Elias was taken to environments. Harsh ones. Unstable ones. Alien ecosystems recreated within controlled biodomes, places where even veteran soldiers hesitated to step. And every time the results were the same. Creatures that should have attacked didn't. Predators that should have torn him apart paused, watched, listened. It wasn't obedience. That became clear quickly. Elias never commanded, never forced. He simply existed within their space as if he belonged there. And somehow, that was enough. Weeks passed. Reports spread across the coalition. At first, quietly, then rapidly. A human interacting with Class 9 fauna. Nonverbal influence over apex species. Field adaptability beyond measurable limits. Theories emerged. Psychological projection. Pheromone mimicry. Unknown neural frequency. None of them held. One evening, Syra requested a private session. No observers. No scientists. Just her and Elias. They stood inside one of the biodomes, a dense, humid jungle filled with low-visibility terrain and hidden predators. "You've been holding back," she said without preamble. Elias raised an eyebrow. "Have I?" "Yes." She stepped closer. "I've reviewed every recording, every encounter. You adapt, but only as much as necessary." A pause. "Why?" Elias looked around the jungle, listening to the distant sounds. "Because pushing too far changes things." Syra frowned. "In what way?" He met her gaze. They stopped choosing. That answer stayed with her. The true test came unexpectedly. A distress signal. Deep space. A remote mining colony on the edge of coalition territory had gone silent. Initial scans showed signs of biological overrun. Unknown species. High lethality. Standard protocol would have sent a combat unit. Instead, Syra made a decision. "Prepare a transport," she ordered. "We're sending Elias." The objections were immediate. "He's not a full operative. This is a live-threat scenario. We don't even know what we're dealing with." Syra didn't waver. "That's exactly why he's going." The transport descended through a haze of ash and static interference. The colony below was in ruins, structures torn open, vehicles overturned, the ground scarred with signs of violent struggle. Elias stepped out first. No heavy armor, no advanced weaponry, just his worn gear. Behind him, secured within reinforced containment, the grave maws stirred. They knew. "Stay on comms," Syra's voice echoed through his earpiece. "Always," he replied, though they both knew he wouldn't. The first sign of movement came from the shadows. A shape, then another. The creatures emerged slowly, sleek, elongated forms with multiple limbs and reflective skin that shimmered like liquid metal. They moved in perfect synchronization. "Hunting." Syra's voice tightened. "Elias, those are not in any database." "I figured," he said quietly. The creatures circled. Faster than the grave maws. Smarter, too. Their movements weren't just predatory. They were tactical. Elias didn't move. Didn't reach for a weapon. Didn't even shift his stance. Instead, he closed his eyes and listened. The first creature lunged. But it wasn't aiming to kill. It was testing. Elias stepped forward, into its path. A risk. A deliberate one. At the last possible moment, he exhaled sharply and dropped his center of gravity, his posture shifting in a way that was neither defensive nor aggressive. Something in between. The creature halted, mid-strike. The others froze. Not out of fear, out of confusion. Elias opened his eyes. They're not hunters, he said softly. Syra's voice crackled. What? They're displaced. He took another step. They don't belong here. The creatures shifted again, their movements less coordinated now. Uncertain. Elias recognized it. He had seen it before. On Earth. Animals forced into environments they didn't understand. Dangerous. Not because they were cruel, but because they were afraid. Easy, he murmured. Not a command. A reassurance. The lead creature lowered slightly. Not a bow, but no longer an attack. The others followed. Back on the transport, the grave moths grew restless. Then, without warning, they went still, as if listening. On the ground, Elias extended his hand. Slowly, carefully. The creature hesitated. Then, it stepped closer. Syra watched from orbit, her breath held. Is he doing it again? No one answered. The creatures had lowered. Not fully, not completely, but enough. Elias smiled faintly. Yeah, he whispered. You're not the enemy. Hours later, the colony was secured. Not through force, not through battle, but through understanding. The creatures were guided, redirected toward a viable habitat, their aggression dissipating once the threat of starvation and confusion was removed. Casualties minimal. Damage contained. Outcome unprecedented. When Elias returned to Karen, 9, there was no laughter waiting for him. Only silence. Respectful. Heavy. Changed. Syra stood at the docking bay as he disembarked. You didn't fight, she said. No, he replied. You didn't dominate them. No. A pause. Then what did you do? Elias glanced back at the transport, where the grave moths waited. Then he looked at her. I listened first. Syra nodded slowly. I think that's what we've been missing. In the weeks that followed, new protocols were drafted. New divisions formed, not focused on destruction, but interaction, understanding, coexistence, and at the center of it all, a human recruit with worn boots, quiet confidence, and a truth the galaxy had never considered. Strength wasn't about making the universe bend. It was about knowing when not to force it. The day Syra addressed the Coalition Council, she chose her words carefully. Humans, she said, do not simply survive hostile worlds. She paused. They learn them. And somewhere, deep within the secured sectors of Karen 9, 3 grave moths rested peacefully. Not as weapons, not as trophies, but as something far more powerful.